Welcome to the E-Sports Tavern. There we go. I got there in the end. It's been quite a morning. Welcome to the E-Sports Tavern, where I am joined by my good friend Bella Lurian, aka Pog.
Hello.
Hello. I'll make sure that we've got the balance of sounds right. Should be pretty good, I think. Should be pretty good.
I'll talk a few times and see if anyone complains.
Yeah. Only about the volume, not about the content,
Right.
please. Yeah. We are talking the League of Legends World Championship, which is currently ongoing. I've kept all of the kind of branding for this the same as the Sports Tavern because it is. I kind of want to draw this together alongside the other sports, as I've kind of mentioned before. Esports is its own category in a sense, but also I think I don't want to kind of say, like proper sports and esports or whatever. It's all sports. So we're just talking sport today. I'll try not to spring any too random sports questions on you as we go along, but we're all good.
We'll see. I mean, there'll probably be some random league questions, and then be like, "Yes, I definitely know," as the expert here.
Yes, possibly. So,
We'll get there.
for those of you who haven't watched very much League of Legends, or are not avid followers of League, generally when you watch a game of League of Legends, you have two commentators on it, which are normally called the shoutcaster, who just gets very excited and worked up to try and encourage the watching people in, and then you have the colorcaster, who actually knows what they're talking about and can provide expert analysis. I very much see myself in the shoutcaster role today, and I've got Bella Lurian in to be my colorcaster, to provide some expert analysis to what we're doing.
I will endeavour to have some kind of expert knowledge on at least some of the things that we talk about today.
Yeah. So has Zyra been played yet? No, I don't think so.
No. She almost certainly will not get played at any of the world's games. We'll see. It's possible that she'll turn up, but I think unlikely.
You never know, do you? I was watching one game the other day, and they said Xayah was being picked, and for a moment my brain was like, Zyra? No. I know. Not happened just yet, but there we are. So, kind of the goal of this stream. So we're going to do a stream today. We're going to do one in 2 weeks' time, and we're going to do one 2 weeks after that. So in 2 weeks' time, we'll be kind of in the midst of the group stages of the World Championship, and the 2 weeks after that will be the day of the final. So we'll be able to talk in detail about the final. But today, It's kind of the plan is kind of be a bit more general for anyone who maybe is new to League of Legends, to esports, to that kind of thing. So we can kind of start from there, but obviously if anyone has any questions or comments or thoughts, we can kind of do whatever really, as long as it's vaguely League of Legends, vaguely World Championship themed, we're all good.
Yep.
We're all good. So yes, as anyone who watches watched my quiz stream yesterday will know, this is the 11th iteration of the World Championship, isn't it?
It is indeed, yes, and it has definitely grown a long way since its early days. So, Season 1 World Championship, like 11 years ago now, however that time works, was, I think, basically just EU versus NA, and was held in one room of a convention called DreamHack between basically whatever teams turned up. So that's when EU managed to win Worlds. Was
The one and only time. Yeah.
The one and only time when Fnatic, who are my team, managed to win Worlds when there was basically no competition.
I think what we can say safely is Fnatic are a former world champion.
So they're literal world champions. They have managed to win, and they do have. So whenever a team wins Worlds, then they get a line of skins themed around their team that Riot makes. So there are Fnatic skins for some champions in the game. But yes, since that point, EU hasn't won, and NA has never won, which I think will tell you about who are the favourites in basically all Worlds things that have gone on. But yes, since then it has grown a long way. We were talking about viewer numbers earlier, so I was looking up last year's Worlds had a peak concurrent viewership of nearly 50 million people. Which, to put that in perspective of other kind of popular sports like Fortnite, their World Championship, the biggest concurrent viewers was just over 2 million. Dota was just under 2 million. League is very much the biggest esport in the world at the moment. So.
It's one of those funny ones. I was looking up about biggest esports in the world, and it slightly depends on your measure. In terms of viewership, League of Legends is far and away the biggest esport in the world currently.
Yes.
But yes, things like highest prize money in tournaments is not League of Legends. I think even,
Dota tends to win on that.
I think even most players, is not League of Legends, I believe.
Possibly.
But in terms of the actual like esports side of things, it is huge, isn't it? Welcome back, Carlos. Good to see you back. So I think even people have been surprised so far. So at the stage we're at the moment in the World Championship is what they call play-in stage. So it's kind of like qualifiers, I suppose. And there have already, the highest point up until yesterday, but there had already been one game which was concurrently viewed by 1.2 million people, which is nearly as many as the final of, what was it you were saying there, Fortnite? The grand final of that. So yeah, it's been big already. It is huge. And Carlos got his copy of Ark at the post office. Good stuff. Yes, and so it is massive, and it's become a big like global event, genuinely global event, as opposed to the as you were saying back in season 1 where it was kind of whoever happened to turn up at a particular event did well. I'm gonna see if I can
bringing up some fancy graphics.
Yes, I'm gonna try and go to, if I can remember which of these many things it is. Here we go. So that's play-ins, but I'm actually going to show first. I'm going to show the number of teams. So this is all the teams which are taking part in the League of Legends World Championship this year. It's being held in Iceland. It was unfortunately had to be rearranged because it was originally going to be in China. Is that right?
So yes, so the 2020 World Championship was supposed to be in China and was in China in the end, but was under COVID restrictions and things. So what they said at the time was, okay, we'll do this one, but no one will be able to go to the stadiums and things, so we'll run it all internally. So next year for the 2021 World Championships, we'll do it in China again when we can do it properly and have audiences and all of that stuff.
Because COVID will be well behind us by then.
Yeah, it'll all be dealt with.
Yes.
Because of the way the restrictions works and things, they did the mid-season invitational, which is the kind of mini tournament in the middle of the year, which is also international. They did that at Iceland this year, and they've also done Worlds in Iceland because it tends to be quite a safe place with relatively easy travel rules to be able to get people in. You need quarantines and stuff, but it's a place that most teams can travel to. Although they have had a problem, so there's normally 2 teams from the kind of Vietnam region who have done pretty well for some of the minor regions in previous years, but they couldn't make it due to visa restrictions. So that's changed the format a little bit because there's 22 teams rather than 24. But over time, so you've got to do what you can. So we have
all of the teams who are at the tournament listed next to us on the screen here. There would originally have been 2 Vietnamese teams as well, but unfortunately they could not go because of COVID restrictions and all of that kind of thing. Carlos says, is it League of Legends the one that started based on Warcraft? So I will attempt to answer this, and then Bellarian can correct me when I get it horribly wrong. So kind of yes. So Warcraft 3, I believe it was modded to have a kind of a mode which was a little bit like League of Legends, and then things grew out of that to replace it. I think Dota, Defense of the Ancients, is the closest to actually the Warcraft 3 stuff. But yeah, basically people were like, this is great, let's just do this. And then Dota, Defense of the Ancients was built, and then LOL, which it always amuses me that it was kind of built as a little bit of a joke, which is why the acronym is LOL, League of Legends, because it was kind of like, let's have fun. And then it's grown into this like multi-million, multi-billion pound, industry out of it. But yeah, Dota, Defense of the Ancients was kind of the one most closely based on Warcraft 3. But the whole genre really was kind of from there. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. So the original Dota was literally just a mod of Warcraft 3, so it was played professionally in the Warcraft 3 engine using that mod to play it. And back when it wasn't as popular as it got, Valve bought the rights to it to make Dota 2 from scratch, but using the same kind of mechanics and champion names and things. So they bought that from Blizzard at the time to be able to kind of take that over and kind of make Dota 2 as a standalone game. And then Blizzard realized how much money there is available in the kind of MOBA space, so they subsequently built Heroes of the Storm to try and kind of get on the MOBA genre, although that hasn't really taken off and isn't really being supported anymore from their side. But yes, it all started from someone making a mod for Warcraft 3, and then everyone being like, "Hey, this is really cool. Let's do this."
Yeah, so. And that I bet that one person who created all of that has not made nearly as much money as everyone else who jumped on it subsequently, I imagine. But,
probably not. Yeah, he was probably paid by Valve to be a part of making Dota 2 and stuff, but yes, almost certainly. I mean, Riot is a ridiculously large business now, so
yes. Although I don't want to dwell on this stuff too much, but I looked at the Twitch. I didn't even really look at the Twitch leaks stuff, to be honest, but I saw some headlines from that. And Riot Games has a relatively low. They made like $1.5 million or something over the 18 months that were covered in the leaks. But actually, I was surprised by how low their Twitch revenue was. I know that this is not something I necessarily expect you to comment upon. It was just a fact.
Yeah, I mean, because you don't need to subscribe to Riot to get access to anything.
I guess that's true, yeah.
Lots of their ads are kind of built into their streams rather than being separate on the platform, so I don't know if they have kind of Twitch ads and stuff directly and things. So
no, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
But there are some League of Legends streamers who are higher up the list than Riot Games, who actually do all the official streams and everything, which I found kind of interesting. By the way, if you are looking for me on that list of streamers, you will have to search for a long, long time to find me down there. I can tell you the amount of money I made from Twitch in the last 18 months does not number in the millions of pounds or dollars. I'll tell you that much, absolutely free.
But I mean, you're probably there somewhere. It's just you're being part of something. When you can be part of a massive data breach, be like, that's.
I was there. I was part of that data breach. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Great. Just what I've always wanted to be part of. But the reason I kind of brought up the list of teams here is because I think it's good to see that it is actually quite global, as noted. The original creator of MOBA, says Carlos, net worth is $100,000. Not bad, but definitely far away from the top. Yes, indeed. Compared to, as I say, I think the highest League of Legends streamer on Twitch was earning like $5 million in that 18-month period or something, and that's only from Twitch. There's so many. Anyway. Yes. I guess. I mean, £100,000 is not bad. $100,000 is not bad. I'm not. I wouldn't turn my nose up at that. But it's not in the same league as the other things, really. Yes, we have here, we've got teams represented at Worlds from China, Korea, Europe, North America, Southeast Asia, Brazil, Commonwealth of Independent States, Japan, Latin America, Oceania, Turkey, and as we've noted, there would be 2 teams from Vietnam, but they are not there. So there is a big spread of different things. I think we have to note the fact that there's not really an African contingent there. I'm sure it does kind of exist. League of Legends does, I'm sure, exist in Africa, but it's not at, pro-wise, it's not at the same place.
Yes, I don't think there's a dedicated Africa server for League of Legends at the moment, and I don't know if that's due to internet infrastructure or whatever. Sure. The fact that Africa is massive, so actually you'd probably need a number of servers to be able to get pinged down to the same levels that it is in, because you even have Western Europe and Eastern Europe and things like that. Yes. So, that's definitely somewhere.
Yeah.
Yes,
and
Brazil is
its own region? Question mark. Yes, and this is one of the things that I found quite interesting when looking at these things is actually how the regions are split up. I find quite interesting. Now, I mean, I guess partly it's probably about size, or geographical size. It's probably partly about number of users, all those things. But obviously, so it's discussed there as Europe is one region. I guess CIS, so the Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS, is the name that was given to parts of the Soviet Union after the Soviet Union disbanded. So I would say CIS is actually also part of Europe, but is a different region. But yes, Brazil and Latin America are separate in their kind of things. Do you know how this kind of evolved, this structure?
So it started from the different servers. So there's a North American server, there's a EU West server, and an EU Northeast server. So EU West tends to be Europe. Some people from Northeast play in the kind of European League, some play in the CIS. So kind of go from there. So that kind of splits. And there's a Korean server and a Chinese server and the Oceania server. So they're all initially certainly all based around the different servers that you would connect to play the game. So they'd have their own ranking ladders of players and all of that. So that's kind of because originally when the kind of pro scene was set up, you had a queue in the actual client where you could queue up as a team and play against other teams in the client. And if you got right to the top, you went to the pro scene. That's kind of how it initially worked. So the very first teams were just people who had played together in the client and then got sponsorship after that point by like an organization to help cover travel expenses and things. So that's kind of where it started from. I don't know whether it's quite as sort of defined around that now. I don't know whether Brazil and Latin America have separate servers or not. I'm not sure about sort of that sort of thing. But yeah, that's certainly where the kind of the demarcation of regions and things started, was all around the kind of server infrastructure of the game itself.
Interesting. And I think it does kind of I think we mentioned about size, but it is important also to think about number of players. So obviously Korea, compared to the size in terms of geographical size compared to some of these things, but Korea is kind of, I guess, well, we'll come on to the different strengths and different play styles of different regions in a minute. But the LPL in China and the LCK in Korea are basically the two big leagues.
Yeah.
Europe and North America are kind of the next level, and then the rest are. They're absolutely on merit, but are probably, you'd say that as a thing.
Yeah.
Kyle says, hello Kyle, good to see you. If you look at player base of even North America versus EU West is twice as large. I know I didn't know that it was quite that big. I knew that EU was huge. They also, pros in Europe like to talk about the fact that EU West is much higher skilled, but I don't have any idea if that's actually true. That might just be the EU players. I've obviously never played on NA, and I'm only like silver ranked anyway, so I'm not a person to comment on these things. But the pros like to talk about things like that.
Yeah.
But
yes, there's certainly. I mean, I think it is. I mean, obviously, if you compare it to other places in the world, North American internet is very good, but there's certainly another point of the North American internet infrastructure tends to have higher ping and lag than quite a lot of parts of Europe, and certainly like Korea tends to have very good internet connections and things, because esports are the kind of national sport of South Korea. So like if you went to a pub like in the UK, you'd go to a pub to watch the football or whatever. In Korea, you'd go to watch StarCraft or League of Legends or whatever. So it's much more the kind of mainstream sport things. So so that does make a big difference.
Yeah.
So
Carlos says, I mean, like we have CONCACAF separated from CONMEBOL. Yes, what happens in Australia, Oceania in football. Yeah, exactly. You have some slightly odd divisions in football as well. I do want to pick up actually just quickly on that and the comparisons between football, particularly. So the Sports Tavern, we often talk about football. That's kind of the main thing we talk about, and some of these comparisons. Firstly, in terms of, we mentioned on a Sports Tavern recently about the different play styles that you sometimes find in different countries, and I think we might go on to talk about that next here. But also, I find it interesting that if you look at the list here, if you're an avid football fan, you will notice some names which you might recognise. So, for example, even though they are in Southeast Asia, PSG Talon are associated with PSG, the football team, Paris Saint-Germain. They are kind of, I mean, PSG are owned by, I'm struggling to remember now exactly who it is, but it's a royal family of Qatar, maybe? Someone along those lines. So it kind of, it makes slightly more sense. Galatasaray, who are representing Turkey, are one of the big Turkish football teams. I think I'm right in saying that... until recently in the European League, there was a team called Schalke 04, Schalke 04. I think they've actually just disbanded, or something along those lines. But
they
Schalke
sold their
04,
franchise,
right? They sold their franchise, but Schalke 04 are also a football team. it's the Sheikh of Qatar or something like that who owns PSG. So yes, lots of money and lots of interest in different things. So yes, but clearly is using the PSG brand to kind of bring those things together. But it's actually not uncommon in quite a lot of parts of Europe for different teams who maybe are most well known for football to have teams in other sports. So like Barcelona and Real Madrid are two of the biggest names in the football world, and they both have like basketball teams and all sorts of other things that go on around the same thing. So I just think that's an interesting point, really, to bring together the Sports Tavern and the E-Sports Tavern.
I see how all the different sports, whether they're esports or traditional sports, are all kind of merging with teams having players in all of them.
Yeah. So. Yes, I was going to say teams having players in all of them. I haven't yet seen a professional footballer on the League of Legends stage, but Cristiano Ronaldo pops up and starts having it. I don't know why I did this like he was using a controller. Well, that's not how you play League of Legends. Yeah. There you go. So Carlos says in Brazil it's the same. So Corinthians, who are again one of the really big, famous Brazilian football teams, have an esports team, and speaking of players being shared across them, there is a Man United player called Jesse Lingard who has recently set up his own esports team called J-Lings Esports. They don't play League of Legends, at least yet. I think they play... What do they play?
Counter-Strike?
Counter-Strike, I think. Counter-Strike Global Offensive. But yeah, again, lots of kind of crossover between... Oh, Grenoble Rugby has an esports team as well. There you go. There you go.
Everywhere.
Didn't know that. Yeah. Okay, so... I guess actually, let's just before we talk about the different styles. I know I've been talking about that for a long time.
Teasing that for later.
I know. Let's talk very quickly about why. So China and Korea have 4 teams. Europe and North America have 3 teams, and it kind of goes down from there. Now, that is to a large degree based on past performance, right?
So yes, there are definitely metrics to do with that, but that is the kind of idea of the strongest regions have the most teams. So yes, as you can see from the list, 2 regions get to send 4 seeds to Worlds. One of those is the region that won the mid-season invitational. So halfway through the year, there is a smaller tournament where each region sends 1 team as their representative. Whoever wins that gets 4 seeds for Worlds. The second region that gets 4 seeds is a bit murkier, but it's generally the region that didn't win MSI that is considered to have the best recent international record. So for this year, that's Korea. So the winners of last year's World Championship were Korean. They came second at MSI. They generally perform pretty well. So
and that's Damwon Gaming, who are the Korean #1 seeds, are the reigning world champions. I'm going all Sean Connery. League of Legends. And I mean, it's fair to say, I think, when we talk about those as the best teams, I think I'm right in saying that we talked about Fnatic won the first World Championship. All of the ones between then and now have been won by China and Korea?
Not quite. So Season 2 was won by the Taipei Assassins, who are from the Southeast Asian region. Okay. Season 3 onwards, yes, it's only been Korea and China.
Okay. so it's fair to say that they probably are the strongest region.
Just to note that Korea didn't start playing until Season 3. So
yes, fair enough. Fair enough.
They,
Yes.
Interesting. Have been pretty dominant.
I really don't want to get into the politics of this, but it's interesting to me that the Taipei Assassins don't play in the China region. That seems odd to me. But anyway...
yes, I don't think they exist anymore as a team. Okay. I don't know where they would be now, but yes.
It seems odd that the Chinese government would allow them to not play in the Chinese region. Anyway, so we've got those as the top seeds, and then basically, I mean, Europe has done well in recent World Championships. I think... last time round got to the semis, G2 maybe, or quarters.
Yeah, I think semis last year, and then the 2 years before that they reached the finals.
Yes,
because
G2 got a final and Fnatic got a final. North America, again, not. I would say they are pretty solidly the 4th most successful team at Worlds, but they are definitely, they generally, do something.
Yes. So the kind of the. As you can see, 2 other regions get to send 3 seeds to Worlds. So this year it's Europe and North America, and that is about general strength of the region. And it's a difficult thing to pin down exactly how that's decided. But at the moment, kind of general strength is considered Europe and North America are the next kind of biggest regions. Now, the interesting thing with that is that the top 4 seeds at Worlds, so when we talk about how they're put into groups and things, that's decided by the top 4 places at the mid-season invitational, and at the mid-season invitational, North America were beaten by PSG Talon from the PCS region. So North America don't have one of the top 4 seeds, but they are still considered to be the 4th strongest region as a whole. And kind of basically the reasoning behind this is that PSG Talon are just very, very good as a single team from their region, but the rest of the teams from that region haven't had anywhere near as much success as PSG Talon is. So they're kind of one of the top seeds going into Worlds, but the region as a whole hasn't kind of made it to being the 4th strongest region with 3 seeds yet.
Interesting. Kyle has said in chat the NA needs to lose 2 seats to make them a minor region. Kyle is in North America. Kyle plays presumably on the North America server, I assume, barring any chicanery. So yes, that's interesting. No, I think it's as someone. So I do watch the LCS whenever I can. This is the North American League. It's been an interesting season this season. 100 Thieves, I would say, are probably not historically one of the biggest teams in the LCS. Team Liquid and Cloud9 both are, I would say. I guess I will hold my, nail my colours to the mast. Is that the same? And say I have 2 teams that I support. I support Fnatic in Europe, but mostly I think because Melodorian is the person who got me into League of Legends and is a Fnatic fan, so I support Fnatic from that way. Also, I have a North American team who are FlyQuest, who are chronically rubbish this season and are nowhere near playoffs, nowhere near Worlds. So we can ignore them as a thing. Kyle says Team Liquid is the best team in North America, he believes. Interesting. One thing I'm going to say quickly, because I didn't mention it before, is what we haven't really said is, even though these are very regional and these teams are based in these areas, you can move between regions. This is not like a national, if you are Chinese, you must play in China. If you are Korean, you must play in Korea. There are players moved about quite a lot. Probably most famously between EU and LCS recently. Cloud9 now have Perks, who was formerly a G2, mid laner, then bot laner, then mid laner, and has got to a Worlds final before, so he now plays at Cloud9. So you can move around. I think it's rare for Chinese or Korean teams to import from outside.
Yeah, I mean they do sometimes import to each other. But yes, there are rules around that. So the import rules that they introduced, you need to have 3 players of your 5-person team from the actual region that you are representing, and then you can have 2 imports from anywhere else. So it does mean that there is some regional identity to the teams that go to Worlds, but yes, you quite often get 1 or 2 players on a team who are actually from a different region and things like that.
Yeah. Interesting.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I've been talking about it for like half an hour. Let's talk about the different play styles of different regions. So this is obviously, this is going to be a generalization. Not every team from every region plays in a particular way. There's obviously individual movement between, but I think it's fair to say that generally the different regions, particularly China and Korea, I think those are the most pronounced. Yeah. China and Korea have very clear identities of how their teams tend to play. Is that fair?
So yeah, I mean it's definitely got a bit muddier, especially in the last couple of years. Certainly when Korea were dominating, they won 4 or 5 years in a row or something. So Korea have historically, and still to a certain extent, play very strategically and they call it kind of macro based, so trying to move around the map, concentrating on killing objectives rather than killing enemy champions and things like that, and only fighting when there is an objective to be won from it rather than just fighting for the sake of fighting and killing champions. So in case anyone doesn't know, in League of Legends, killing enemy champions gives you gold to buy items, so it increases your power. Killing objectives also gives you gold, but it also helps you progress towards killing the enemy nexus, which is what you need to do to win the game. So Korean games tend to have lower kills per minute and more focused around the kind of strategy of the game and things like that.
I think if you were an outsider, doesn't know very much about League of Legends, watching an LCK game, you'd probably think it's fairly slow. It's it builds slowly. Teams try to get little advantages, what they call snowball that, build leads, eventually get to the point where you are just stronger than your opponent and you can outplay them, essentially.
Yeah. Yes. And there is so because quite like most of the teams historically played that way, then there were things of like they'd recognize that they were at a slight disadvantage where a fight might happen and then just not fight rather than kind of flip a coin on a 40% chance of winning or whatever, so that it kind of meant that just less fights happened. And I think there were some games certainly in the past that teams managed to win without killing a single enemy champion because of just making moves around the map.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Which so yes, that's kind of their historic playstyle. Since China have managed to win a couple of World Championships and things more recently, that has now been evolving to a more aggressive playstyle because China fights all the time. That's kind of their sort of regional identity, is just fighting often about everything, like just any objective, or when champions just meet somewhere, they'll just fight. So high numbers of kills per minute, really action-packed games. That's kind of the identity they go for, of trying to kind of outskill the opponent by just fighting, and even if you're not quite as powerful with items or levels, you just play better than them and then beat them in the team fight. That's kind of the identity of the Chinese league, basically.
Yeah, Kyle says, Raptor Camp is up, better 5v5 and TP 3 people in. So the Raptor Camp is like a minor piece of the jungle, and basically what that's saying is, that's come up, we better just have our entire team descend here, use up all our resources to try and fight for this minor thing. And that is kind of the stereotypical Chinese way. And as we said, it's not that clear cut, but it definitely... Even now, I think if you can see a difference generally in those types of play. And I think I heard a commentator on one of the play-in games talking about how like the Chinese way of playing as well is like if they realise that there's an objective to play for in 2 minutes time. So what they'll do is they'll start fighting early to try and deplete resources from the other team to make it so that in 2 minutes time they have an advantage. And so it's even if they're not actively fighting for things, they're kind of passively fighting, trying to gain small advantages. Whereas for the Korean playstyle, it might be much more like, okay, actually, we don't think we can do very much here, but we can maneuver our team around here, get a little advantage here, get a little advantage there, and build up that way. It's I think probably for the outsider who maybe hasn't watched very much League of Legends before, definitely the LPL tends to be much more action packed. It tends to be people flying in, trying to get kills everywhere.
Yes. Yeah, like, so the kind of the LPL games, if you watch it tends to be much more about shouting loudly about exciting things that are going on because there's always fights and things happening. Whereas if you watch the LTK, you'll tend to get more commentary about the kind of detailed mechanics of the game because they have long kind of pauses to fill while the teams are maneuvering around and without the kind of the fights going on. So then they end up kind of talking about lots of that kind of nuance of different ways the game works and things because they have to fill time, and very much like any kind of commentators or radio presenters, if there's time to fill, you've got to fill it with something, so they end up talking about lots of random bits and pieces.
And I think I found it quite funny again watching one of the play-in games for this World Championships. They have commentators from all over the world, obviously I listen to commentary on these things in English because that's my first language. And so they have commentators who routinely commentate on the LPL. They have commentators who routinely commentate on the LCK. And they are coming together to commentate on the Worlds. And so you can commentate on whichever teams happen to be playing at that time. And it was two LPL commentators who got halfway through a game and they're like, so this is what it's like to be able to talk about things other than what's immediately going on the screen, as they were able to actually talk about things going on in the game. I found that very funny. It's a very, very interesting one, and so I think it's kind of interesting sometimes to see those regions come up against each other. And as we've said, historically, I think Korea have tended to come out on top, but it hasn't been quite so one-sided in recent years, has it?
Yes, so recently, Damwon from Korea won last year's World Championship, but the two before that were won by China. So FPX was the year before that.
Fun plus Phoenix.
Yes, I'm trying to remember who were before FPX, and I'm not entirely sure right now.
Was it RNG? Did they win one?
I don't think they've ever won Worlds. They won MSI this year, but yes.
They did, Invictus was 3 years ago, says Kyle.
There we go.
Good shout.
Yeah,
He also says,
chat.
in LPL, you can't even watch a replay. It's chaos. Yeah. And I think I love watching both styles. Okay, I would say probably as we move on to any of the other regions, there's a bit more of a mix, isn't there? But I love watching both of them, but for very different reasons of the action-packed style. But again, I think if you think about this in comparison to some other sports, again, I'm going to go to football because that's the one that most people know. A few years ago, the dominant team around the world were Barcelona, who played a style called tiki-taka, which basically meant they passed the ball so many times, the opposition just got dizzy, confused, and then eventually Barcelona managed to score. They passed so many times in a game. It was absolutely unbelievable. So skillful, all of that stuff. But then in more recent times, a bit more of a direct style of football can come through. People can win doing that, and it kind of causes a re-evaluation a little bit. And not to say that those styles are bad, but there are other ways of combating it. I think it's interesting to see how these different styles match up against each other. I think for me is interesting. Carl says Korean macro is top tier, but in my opinion, China is more technical in individual player mechanics because they are constantly pushing limits. I think that's probably I mean, to be honest, you guys are both higher ranked than me, so you probably know these things better than me anyway. So it doesn't really matter if I agree. But I think that's fair. But I think both require an understanding of the game, but in different ways. And I think the really top teams, so the ones that are winning worlds, who are the ones who can kind of do both. So they might favour one or the other. But I think sometimes some of the teams that do well but not quite win are the teams who are fantastic mechanically champion. They can win the fights, but actually they're so busy fighting they don't notice that the other team is doing stuff all across the map. And similarly, you can have all these careful plans, you can manoeuvre your champions around, but then if they get dived on and killed, it doesn't matter. So it is about kind of coming up with the combination. Carlos, talking about Barcelona, I think is that how they waited to have an opportunity, but then a manager like Mourinho comes along and plays a bit more of a reactive game. It's exactly that. It's very hard for a team playing super aggressively against a team that plays really defensively but tries to just kind of counter-attack or whatever. And it's exactly the same kind of thing. You have to match your tactics up to your opponent, to the game, to the champions. We haven't even mentioned, but one of the other kind of key things is the macro around League of Legends changes. I was going to say constantly. It's actually fixed for the duration of the World Championships, but which champions are considered strong, which champions match up well against others. There's all kinds of things there to think about as well, which at the pro level really do make a difference. I've mentioned before, at the level that I play, which is rubbish, silver level, it doesn't really matter. Like, you're much better off picking a champion that you know rather than one which directly counters the one that the opponent is playing. But it really does make a big difference at pro level, doesn't it?
Yeah, and there's been champions that have been played in the play-ins that weren't played for the entire year, basically, in the professional scene because patch changes and things, and they're trying to work out which things are strong, and there've been some of them that have worked well, and some that really haven't so far. But yeah, it's really interesting to see the new champions being worked with, and as you say, the kind of regions matching up against each other. Like, I don't know how much you've actually watched of the play-ins, and I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, but it was really interesting. So there's the fourth seed from China and the fourth seed from Korea are in the play-in stages, which have been happening at the moment, and they played each other as the first game of the play-in stage, and it was really interesting to see that the Chinese team was actually playing a bit more of a macro game and fighting less than they would have done in their home region to kind of match that up a bit against their Korean counterparts and things like that. So it's interesting to see how those styles go together. And also in without saying who's there or whatever, in the best of fives that happened yesterday, one of the games was the game with the most kills per minute of any Worlds game ever. So
I'm looking forward to seeing that. I haven't caught up on that one yet. I'm about a day behind at the moment. With the amount of streaming I've done this week, I'm about a day behind on catching up, so I haven't caught that one yet. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Okay, well, I'm gonna move us on because we've talked extensively about this. So I'm gonna move on to look a little bit at the actual play-ins, which is what we've been talking about, and this is kind of the kind of qualifying. So the minor regions and the lowest seeds of the major regions have come into the play-in stage to get into the group stage. So I'm just going to read. This is the official explanation from Riot Games, which I just think is kind of incomprehensible. So we'll try and explain it afterwards. So they say the 10 play-in teams will be split into 2 groups of 5 teams each. Each team will play 1 game against every other team in their group. The top team in each group will automatically advance to the group stage. 3rd and 4th place teams will play a best of 5, with winners challenging the other group's 2nd seed for the last 2 spots. These matches will determine the 4 play-in teams that move on to the group stage. Following the conclusion of all matches of the play-ins, the 4 teams that have advanced will be drawn randomly into the existing group stage groups, following the rule that no team may be in the same group as another team from its region. Now, there were far too many occurrences of the word group in there. But essentially what that's saying, is you can see on the screen there is a Group A and a Group B. Each team in those groups plays every other team in there once, to begin with. If you finish top of your group, you automatically go through to the next stage. So you've qualified if you go through first. If you finish, let's see, 2nd or 3rd, the top team will automatically advance to the stage. 3rd and 4th place teams, okay, now you're going to have to tell me.
So top of the group goes through automatically. Second person in the group plays against the winner of a 3rd, 4th match of the other group.
Okay, so if you finish, let's trace this through. If you finish 3rd or 4th in Group B, you have to play the other team that finishes 3rd or 4th. You play them over a best of 5.
Yes.
If you win that, you then have to play 2nd place from the other group. So if you finished 3rd in Group B, you beat 4th in Group B over 5 games. You then play 2nd in Group A over 5 games again. And then the winner of that also qualifies. So there's basically two teams. No, I was going to say 2 teams from each group qualify, but that's not necessarily true, because 3 from one group could qualify.
Yes, so the point of doing that crossover is because people are drawn into groups A and B semi-randomly from the people who get there, and if lots of the strongest teams all ended up in one group, it's to make sure they can all get out and get to Worlds. So yes, it is a really good system, but it is.
I actually agree, Kyle. I think it is a good system. It is confusing, and I think Riot have done a very bad job of explaining it in their little paragraph. Essentially, as we've said, so HLE, Juanla Life Gaming,
E-Sports.
E-Sports.
So
and
Group
LNG.
A has.
Yeah.
So that's 4th seed from Korea and 4th seed from China in Group A, and then the 3rd seed from North America and the 2nd seed from Southeast Asia are the kind of seeds in Group B. That's actually different this year. So the spot that Beyond Gaming have of the kind of 2nd seeded team was supposed to be the 3rd seed from Europe. But then when Vietnam couldn't make it, the 3rd seed from Europe took their spot in the main group stage, and the 2nd seed from the Southeast Asia got put as the kind of seed into the playoffs. So yes, there's been a bit of kind of change around due to kind of COVID changes and things.
So in fairness, it has got more confusing by the fact that those changes have taken place. But I do agree. I do think it's a good way of kind of allowing the best teams through. I think the danger with all of these is that it can just exclude teams from smaller regions, but they do have the chance here to play through to get through. I think that's a good thing. We kind of will see from this. So 4 teams in total from these will join in the group stages, but it's all a little bit up in the air exactly who that will be. Although it's now that we're getting towards the end of the play-in stages, it's a bit clearer. But
but yes, I think it is a good system, and it's also the way that they've done it now. It means that if one of the, as they call them, developing regions became a really strong region, then there are mechanics to be able to make them a major region over one of the existing ones. So, for example, at the mid-season invitational, there is one team from every region that goes there. There's still a kind of playing system and stuff. But if someone from, say, the Japanese league won the mid-season invitational, then the Japanese league would get 4 seeds at Worlds, and they'd get a top seeding in the group stage and things. So the mechanisms are in place that if one region becomes really good, they can take more seeds at Worlds and things. So,
and as we heard before, PSG Talon are very strong in terms of the Southeast Asian League. So if they did very well and then they won, I still think that would be a stretch. But if that happened, that would affect all of this stuff. As Kyle correctly says in chat, the 4 teams that qualify from the play-ins one goes into each group, A, B, C, and D, and you can't play in the same group as another team from their region.
Yes.
Because that is a rule of the draw. So I'm going to move on to the nenext thing, which hopefully will kind of show what we're doing. So this is unfortunately, I couldn't find a version of this which didn't give a little bit of a spoiler, because you can see that one of the 4th place teams is actually filled in there. So I apologise. But this is the group stage draw. So the teams at the top in the kind of top place in each group are the seeds. So we have Damwon Gaming from Korea, Edward Gaming from China, PSG Talon from Southeast Asia, and Mad Lions from Europe. So they kind of got automatically put into different groups, and there is a second seeding system. There's basically like 3 pots, is that right? So you draw a first seed team, a second seed team, and a third seed team, but no teams from the same region can play each other, which is how they know that LNG Esports is going in there, because they have qualified and it's the only group that they can go into, because LNG, I've now lost track of whether they're Korea or China, but
LNG are Chinese.
LNG are Chinese, so every other group has a Chinese team in, so therefore they have to go in that group. Similarly, if the Korean team, Hanwha Life Esports, qualify for the group stage, they have to go into Group C, because it's the only group that doesn't have a Korean team. No. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Kyle says, making LNG play in the play-ins was an insult to their team compared to who they had to play, minus LHE, who are good. Yeah, it is a difficult one, because the trouble is, I fundamentally like the fact that the 4th seeds from the big regions have to play in there, because it means that, you know, the other teams do have a chance of going through. Yes, realistically, HLE and LNG were overwhelming favourites to qualify, but it means that there is a chance for the other teams to go through.
It's also nice to have them in the play-ins, because for some of the developing regions, even getting to play teams from some of the bigger regions that have more resource behind them and more experience and things is a really good experience for the team, and it's definitely shown that getting to have that experience of playing on the world stage can really help develop both an individual team and a region as a whole. So getting to have that experience of playing a few games against them, and also when they're in those groups, they tend to scrim or do practice games against people in the other group because they're not playing them as much. So then that it gives a lot of kind of exposure for teams of being able to play people from the bigger regions and things. So
don't worry, Carl. I know you're just kind of teasing it. It's not a. I know you weren't kind of having a serious go. Carlos says it's a bit what we discussed in other sports. Rugby comes to mind. What in particular was it that was kind of triggering that thought in your mind, Carlos? Was it in terms of the way the kind of groups are done and things like that? Or was it something like that? Because a lot of the more traditional sports do a very similar thing. So when you get to like international club competition, they often try and get it so that there's lots of seeding and you can't play teams for your own regions. And I mean, if in the Football Champions League draw, for example, no 2 English teams can be drawn in the same group, all of that kind of stuff. So again, it's a lot. I think esports has the advantage that it can draw on a lot of the experience of other sports, but it can also kind of say, but you know what, actually I don't like this, some of this stuff isn't working, and then it goes, oh, the playing of other lower tiers to play against the top ones. Yeah, okay, I'm with you. Yeah, exactly. And I think it is a really good way of giving, as you say, giving people that exposure. Also, I mean, probably some of the smaller teams wouldn't necessarily like this, but it also means that it gives those players, it kind of puts them in the shop window for some of the big teams who might say, you know what, actually, I want to give a chance. I'm just thinking of, Mad Lions, was it after Worlds last year? They brought in Armut and El Yoya, who both, I think, had played at Worlds against them. And they were like, actually, they're quite good, we'll have them. So it kind of gives those players a chance to make a move as well.
And like Oceania, who Peace are their representatives this year, I think. That might be wrong. I don't remember who's moved, but Oceania as a region lost quite a number of players to other regions, kind of poaching them because they saw that they were good and things. So that actually impacted their region quite a bit in terms of being able to field pro teams because they were getting paid more to be imports other places, which is kind of good for the individual players. But
it's a little bit of a difficult one. And obviously they do buy the contracts out from those teams largely, so there is money going in. But it is, as ever, as with all sports, as with basically everything in the world really, sometimes money talks, and that can make it difficult for some of the smaller teams. Kyle says, I also really like all the teams are in Iceland already, and it's been really good content on Twitch, watching people like viewing Challenger EU West solo queue filled with all the group stage players who are practicing. Oh, can you imagine? You feel like you're getting on well, and then suddenly you're drawn against all of these amazing players. I mean, obviously not G2, because, they didn't make it, but... G2 are historically now, I think they are the most successful EU team. I think they got ahead of Fnatic recently. And they didn't make it to Worlds, which some people quite enjoyed that fact. Others, maybe not so much. That's true as well. Carlos says it also helps to develop viewership and gets experience. So I am, probably in those regions where esports are not such a big thing, but there will be a few people who think, I'd like to support this team as they're playing against some of the best players in the world, getting to see this stuff going on. And I would say, from what I've seen, this is only the second World Championship that I've watched in detail. I watched little bits before. It's rare for a team, even from one of the developing teams, to get absolutely annihilated. There is what they call like a perfect game, where a team doesn't kill any champions, get any neutral objectives. Basically, they achieve nothing in the game, and that's still very rare, even in these levels.
Yes, it's definitely the level of the other regions has definitely improved a lot over time. There was definitely, if you go back sort of 4 or 5 years, then yes, kind of there were games when some of the kind of Korean or Chinese teams basically picked whoever they wanted, even if they weren't strong in the meta, and would be able to just kind of dominate the regions. But I think that shows the kind of long-term impact of things like this, of being able to get that international experience and things, and getting that exposure has helped those teams grow to the point that now that, yes, they are serious challenges to people, and yes, the kind of the main regions are generally the favourites, but they don't always win the games. So
there we go. So Kyle's, sorry, I'm getting myself confused. Carlos says, you start to have League of Legends being mentioned on the big regular sports show in Brazil now on Open TV, which is and I think that's exactly the kind of stuff we're talking about. That's really interesting. Kyle also says, so we're from the Challenger stuff in Iceland, you're getting 6 or 7 pros in ladder games facing their own teammates in some cases. Yes, I can imagine that the chat function on that is getting some serious usage going into the chat. Yes, because I think it's mostly because of the COVID stuff. All the teams have had to travel together at the same, exactly the same time, but all teams are already there, where maybe otherwise you might have a big team come in after the play-ins because they know they're going to make it. But there's also all kinds of questions around, so if, for example, a player got sick while during the tournament, normally a team could just bring in someone who was like a free agent, they could do whatever, but now they have to get a loan from a member of a team from their own region who already has a passport and a visa to go, and it has changed some of those other things as well.
And there's been a couple, for example, Vizicachi is playing on Peace in place of their normal top laner because he couldn't get a visa to be able to get to Iceland because of COVID restrictions and things. So there's definitely been some we live in interesting times and there's always going to be different bits and pieces that are having to be changed to take account of it so that teams can still play.
Was it, this might be my memory playing up on me, and you or Kyle may be able to correct me, was it PSG who did really well at MSI with 2 replacement players on their team because they had visa issues?
Yes, so they had a thing with the MSI that for some of the tournament they had to have subs because their main players couldn't get there in time. So after the kind of group stages of that, their kind of main players came in, and actually there was some talk of actually we think that their kind of standard players are worse. It's an interesting. So yes, it's definitely kind of interesting to see how all of the kind of the subs that have been needed have kind of impacted everything.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we only have a couple of minutes left because we're only going till 12 today. Just a reminder quickly before we move on, we will have another Esports Tavern in 2 weeks' time when the group stages are well underway, and then another one just before the final. But just before we wrap up, just having a quick look at these group stage, the actual groups. What do you make of them? Do you think there are any easier groups, harder groups? What's your feeling on it?
So, yes, we can definitely go crystal ball as well at the end, Carl. We'll do that in terms of our prediction. I think they're all going to be interesting for different reasons. So, Group A, Damwon are the winners from last year. Fun Plus Phoenix are the second seeds from China, but actually lots of people think that they're stronger than EDG. EDG happened to beat them on the day in the Chinese final. So Group A may well contain the two strongest teams in the entire championship, and you get to see them play right from the start.
Yes.
Does mean that Rogue's chances are not great.
Rogue are an EU, a European League representative who, we maybe don't see doing wonderfully well on that.
It's been nice to see you, Rogue, and I hope you have a good stay in Iceland.
Indeed.
Yes,
you never know. Rogue. I would say Rogue, in terms of European play, Rogue have been kind of the most consistent of the European teams, I would say. But that potentially means actually they stand less chance, because Fnatic and Mad Lions both have quite a bit of variance in their play, I would say. And either of them, I would say, on their absolute best day, if Damwon or Fun Plus are not quite on it, could get a win. You never know. Rogue, I feel like, are very, very good. Obviously, they're at the World Championships, but they are consistently very, very good, and probably that level is not quite as high as the others, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah. And obviously, we wait and see who the fourth person is in the group.
Yes. So the fourth person can't be Korean or Chinese, so will either be it will be someone from the developing regions.
Yeah.
So or NA. So whoever gets into that group with Rogue is going to... I mean, you'll get to play some of the best players in the world, but you're probably not getting it. It would be a very big surprise if the two people coming out of Group A aren't Damwon and Fun Plus Phoenix. Group B, again, it's going to be interesting. So Edward Gaming, top seed from China, maybe not quite as strong as FPX, but still a really good team. 100 Thieves, top seed from the North America, and SKTT1 from Korea, who have won the World Championship more than any other team, I think, but are actually the third Korean seeds this year, but are still very strong. I think, I mean, there are no easy groups at Worlds, really. Everyone are good teams. I think of all the groups they could have got, this is probably one of the best chances for 100 Thieves to get out. I still don't think they will, but like of the groups, there should be some close games going on. I think, as is probably generally going to be the case, I think it's most likely that Korea and China will get out of this group, but I think it's quite possible for 100 Thieves to do an upset and manage to get out of it, so that'd be interesting to see. Group C, I think that Fnatic pulled basically the best draw that they could have managed to get in Group C. So PSG Talon, obviously first seed from Southeast Asia. Of all the top seeds that Fnatic could have got, being European, definitely the easiest because they're not Korean or Chinese. RNG being the Chinese third seed, I mean, they won the mid-season invitational. They are a really good team. But you're going to have someone Chinese in your group probably, so there's no way of getting out of that. I think Fnatic. So I mean, we've yet to see if Hanwha Life get out of the play-in stage, then they will be in here because that's the only group without a Korean team.
They can be, yes.
Yeah.
So, yes.
But yes, I think that Fnatic have a strong chance of getting out of this group, which is definitely good for them. I think there'll be some really close games going on, so it's going to be a good group to watch. And then Group D, so Mad Lions being the top seed from Europe. Gen G are the Korean second seed, but they've definitely been the team that has had the most kind of talk about how good they actually are coming out of Korea, so that'll be interesting to see.
And they were one of the favoured teams last time round at Worlds, weren't they? Did they get to the final? I'm trying to remember. It's been a long time. They certainly did okay at the last.
Yes, not so. Last year's Worlds was interesting because coming out of groups, there were 3 Chinese teams, 3 Korean teams, and 2 European teams getting to the knockout stage, and you had 3 Koreans on one side and 3 Chinese on the other side. So you were basically guaranteed to have a Chinese-Korea final. But yes, so yes, I think they lost in semis to Damwon, I think, but I'm not sure. But so I think they're all interesting for different reasons. I think that Mad could get out of Group D. I mean, it like LNG. Obviously, we've seen that they've got out of play-ins. They've definitely been looking very strong in the play-in stage, but we don't know how they'll measure up against the kind of better teams. I think it could be a close group. So that can be
And we heard from Kyle, who is in NA, that he thinks TL are probably the strongest NA team. What do you think TL's chances of getting out of Group D are, Kyle? Who also says minus Samsung Galaxy and Samsung White, I guess, but I believe that was after a team merge, I believe. Ah, right. Okay, interesting. Oh, Carl says 0%. TL are not getting out of Group D. You heard it here first. Fair enough. Yeah, it's definitely a tough one. Mad Lions had a very mixed season in EU. They got off to a very bad start, but then came very strong at the end. If they really turn it on like they did, I definitely think they've got a chance of getting out. But I think probably Gen G to go top, and then between Mad and LNG for second, I would say most likely, in my opinion. But as we've heard, I'm just a shoutcaster, so I
think it depends how. There's been a lot of talk. So Gen G are quite a Korean team, as it were. They're quite kind of macro-based, slow starting, kind of all of that stuff. And it depends on whether the more aggressive approach of Mad and LNG can be able to kind of punish their early game and being able to kind of run away with victories there. And if so, I can see Gen G finishing third, but they could equally finish top if their kind of more macro style ends up being the one that wins out. So there's definitely some good games in store.
Yeah. So the question then is, we were asked about the crystal ball. Who are you going for winning Worlds? Let's just go for that at the moment. Straight out winner.
So yes, I think there are a few strong contenders. The person that I picked was Damwon Gaming. I think they are very strong. There's been a lot of talk of the Korean League at the moment basically being Damwon and then everyone else. They are definitely the strongest team out of Korea. And yeah, I think they're looking really good. It's definitely going to be really interesting to see how they match up against the Chinese teams, which is, I think, partly why Group A is going to be so interesting seeing it so early on. But they were who I picked.
Yes, unfortunately for the purposes of debate, I also picked Damwon Gaming for very similar reasons, really. I think they were very, very strong last year. Kyle went for FPX. I think they were a close second for me. I think I had Damwon. I don't really know very much about EDG. I've seen them play a bit, but I would say the two of them were right up there. Kyle says that he doesn't think any NA teams are going to get out of groups. Honestly, I could see the same thing happening for Europe, which would be...
I think it'll be a real upset if any NA teams do get out of groups. I think the kind of expectation with the groups as they are, and I think basically the groups however they could be, is that they probably wouldn't. But I can see an upset happening. Yeah, as Carson mentioned as well, I can see Mad getting out of groups, and I can see Fnatic getting out of their group.
I think I would
it'll
agree.
be easy for either. But
I think definitely both have a shot, but I think I wouldn't be shocked if neither of them did. I think.
Yes, I mean, I think if none of NA or EU get out, obviously because they both have 4 seeds, it is technically possible to have 4 Chinese and 4 Korean teams, the only people in knockout stage, which would be the first time that has ever happened. I don't think it'll all go that way to that extent. I would have thought at least one European or NA team or PSG Talon. They have been looking really strong. They could manage to make it out of Group C. So I don't think we'll end up with just Korean and Chinese teams in knockouts. I think Hanwha Life haven't been looking as strong as LNG are, so I think they're probably a kind of weakness in the Korean armor as well. So
yes, and I think that's the thing. I think I would be surprised if we end up 4 Korean, 4 Chinese teams, because upsets do happen. Games, things never quite go exactly how you expect. But I think, again, at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily be completely shocked if it did happen, but I don't think it will. That's kind of where we stand. Awesome. Well, we've run over our time, so I do apologise if anyone is rushing off anywhere. But I've had a lot of fun talking about this. As I say, we are going to be doing a similar thing in a couple of weeks' time, where we'll be talking about how the group stages are going. We'll be able to talk in a bit more detail, maybe about how things are shaping up for the end knockout rounds. We can look at all of that kind of thing as well. And then, 2 weeks after that, we'll be doing a preview of the final. And we'll revisit the fact that the two shouts were Damwon Gaming and FunPlus Phoenix and see how things are going from there.